The summer of 2022, I had stepped down from Lively and I was just literally crying every single day. I was so sad. My husband jokes, he's like, I've never seen you cry over anything like this. But there was such a hole in my heart and I started to fill it with ideas in wellness. I was like, what if I could make wellness a space that brought editorial and fashion and emotion the way that it lives in apparel? What could that be?
Welcome to Maker's Mindset. I'm your host, Nancy Twine. In this episode, I'm in conversation with Michelle Cordeiro Grant, founder and CEO of GORGIE. She's a serial entrepreneur, brand builder, and innovator. In 2016, she founded Lively, a lingerie brand inspiring women to live passionately, purposefully, and confidently. And in 3 years, she grew the brand from concept to 5 stores, over 165,000 ambassadors, and a $105 million acquisition. In 2022, Michelle founded her next venture, GORGIE, the energy drink with benefits that actually taste good, feels good, and looks good too. Michelle is also an avid angel investor, public speaker, mentor, and mom of 2. Let's go ahead and jump in. So welcome, Michelle. I'm so excited to have you here today. Michelle and I have actually known each other. We've known each other for a few years now. We met through YPO, which is a community for entrepreneurs and executives. And I've just always admired you so much, not just because you're an amazing serial entrepreneur, but because you exude so much positive energy, even when you walked in here today. And it's like constant. And I just think it's so incredible what you represent. You've done so much as an entrepreneur. We have so much to learn from you, and I'm really excited to dig in.
Amazing. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to be here. From the moment we met, it was like we were family, friends, and entrepreneurs.
Thank you. I do call you my sister.
Fact, everyone.
Totally. Well, you started your first company, Lively, in 2016. Talk to us about what Lively is and what inspired you to create change in the lingerie industry.
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, I never grew up with the word entrepreneur. So the fact that I started a company, now twice is wild. Lively, I really started because I love building brands. And, being the daughter of 2 Indian immigrants from, living in New Smithville, Pennsylvania, where brands, looking back, were my way of really connecting with the communities and people around me. Fast forward, working for big brands like Victoria's Secret gave me so much joy. And seeing something that we created walking down the street on billboards and on TV. However, when I got married and I started to think about where I was going in my career, having a daughter one day, what brand would she love? Where was that brand? I couldn't find it. And so starting Lively was a YOLO moment. It was not supposed to work, to be honest. It was just like, what if we could create a brand that looked like what I saw on social media, what I wanted to wear down the street? And frankly, it became a conversation about what women were actually wearing, which was athleisure. 60% of the time they were wearing athleisure and not working out. That was why Lively was born. Community and females around the world were saying, this is a category that we loathe. And we're like, let's change that.
Wow. And so you ended up selling Lively 3 years after you launched it for roughly $105 million, which is an unprecedented exit in this industry. What advice would you give other entrepreneurs who are thinking about selling their company? And how do you know it's time to do that?
Like I said, I didn't think Lively was ever going to work. The statistics on startups is, I think 60% of the time they implode with 2 to 3 years, on the books, 90% of the time in less than 10. So when we were approached to be acquired, my first answer was, no, I'm not ready. What does that even mean? And my advice to founders and entrepreneurs is don't build for the sale. And when it comes, then you think about the people around you and what's best for the company, the brand, the people involved, et cetera. It's just like life decisions. When you're making a decision to move or take a new job, you're taking into account so many different fundamentals. Same thing with selling your company. Is it the right time? Is it the right number? And what's the outcome? For me, Lively needed a big sister to launch into great places like Target and become a global brand. And it was the right thing for the people that, were working for the brand, invested in the brand, and for my family.
I love that. And I especially love what you said about don't launch to sell. Because I will tell you, for me, it's a little bit of a red flag when I meet a founder who's just launching their company and they're already talking about exits. They haven't even, scaled to a size where that even makes sense. And I think the best brands are really rooted in authentic passion. You're building it because you have a real emotional connection to the product, to the service. But if you're so focused about the end result, I think you have to actually pause and really think about, why am I doing this? Is it about the money? Because if so, you start to feel that, right, through the brand. It's not that sort of genuine, authentic connection to a real purpose.
Yeah. And the consumer feels that. They feel the excitement and the energy, which sounds so cheesy when I say that, of the people building the brand. And when it's not rooted in that love and that deep feeling of changing the world and bringing good, it just doesn't spread the same way, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And I have a few friends, so do you, who have exited their businesses. And one of the really hard things sometimes about leaving the company that you've built is that you go through a bit of like an identity crisis.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Where you're like, who am I without this company? And it's interesting because Candace Nelson, who created Sprinkles Cupcake, she actually wrote a really interesting article about this dynamic in Inc. So what was that experience like for you? And did you feel like you needed to reinvent yourself after exiting?
Yeah, I mean, it was such an emotional journey. You think that the day that you sell your company is going to be the greatest day ever. And while it is like a tremendous milestone, so deeply exciting and something that we're very proud of, as a founder, it's almost sad in a strange way, because you're letting go of something that came from within, that you put every ounce of love and passion and tears into. And to now say to this young child that was 3 years old, off to college you go, and you make your own decisions and others will guide you. So tough. I stayed on for a couple years, as CEO graciously, because I loved the business so much. And after 3 years, I realized that I needed the brand more than the brand needed me. And that was probably one of the saddest moments that I had of self-reflection. Like, I could literally cry right now thinking about it. But I remember calling, the chairman and sharing with him, I think there's someone better suited to be CEO than me. And I realized in that moment, I love building. Like, I love the creating of an idea in my head that feels impossible to the world. But what if I could make it possible and create jobs and create happiness?
Part of sending your baby off to that next stage is also symbolic of the fact that you've now created a legacy. And at the end of the day, I think that's what all founders want. They want their company to be successful, but they also want something that can outlive them, right?
Yes. I mean, I always said, if Lively could live on beyond me and my children can see that billboard one day that stood for, today bras and undies, tomorrow the world, like, that was always my dream for my daughter to see that.
Yeah, I love that. So following your exit from Lively, you then go on to found GORGIE in 2022. So talk to us about what GORGIE is and why you decided to launch a beverage company after exiting a brand in the lingerie space.
Yes, bras to beverage. I mean, am I the first? I'm so curious. Not a natural transition, but Lively was such a serendipitous, insane roller coaster for me. And part of what I loved about it is it was so utopian. I didn't know what to do, but I missed the figuring out part of building and creating a brand. And so the category that was speaking to me was CPG. And the summer of 2022, I had stepped down from Lively and I was just literally crying every single day. I was so sad. And my husband jokes, he's like, I've never seen you cry over anything like this. But there was such a hole in my heart, and I started to fill it with ideas in wellness. I was like, what if I could make wellness a space that brought editorial and fashion and emotion the way that it lives in apparel? What could that be? And never did I think I would end up in energy. But as I surveyed my community and I said, but what if you could take the 6 pills that you take every day as your supplements and have them as candy or chocolate? But everybody wanted a drink. I'm like, really? Not a powder? Nope, I'm ready to drink. And when I moved to Florida with my family, all of a sudden, everywhere I went, I saw people holding energy drinks. And a light bulb kind of went off where it felt very similar to the lingerie category, where it's seen as a chore and dated, yet it's $13 billion in the United States. I found energy was $20 billion in the United States, yet to me it felt so dated and just not relevant, yet needed. And so I put that on TikTok after going to Whole Foods. I saw all these energy drinks out there saying, we're better for you, we're a healthy alternative. And I was like, oh my gosh, amazing, I'm gonna go try one. And when I went to Whole Foods to buy one, the woman there was like, we can't sell them, they don't meet our health criteria. And you're like, the universe has spoken. I literally posted, what if we made a drink that was energy meets wellness? And this was Labor Day of 2022. We got 100,000 likes. And that's kind of where the goosebumps went up. And you're just like, oh my God, this is an idea. Let's keep going with it. And from that TikTok post on Labor Day to the shelves of Whole Foods actually in January 2023, GORGIE was born.
So one of the things that I really love about GORGIE is that it's not just a beverage brand, but it's also a lifestyle brand. And I'm an investor, a proud investor in GORGIE. And when you were fundraising, you didn't just send me, the pitch deck and a company snapshot. You also sent me like this mood board and the brand visuals. And I loved that so much. You invested a lot of time up front, really creating sort of the GORGIE world and the brand identity. Can you talk a little bit about what that process was like of, taking those ideas from your brain and translating them on paper? How do you create a brand identity?
Yeah, I think you have to take a very human approach, right? And so I always say that I'm not a deck girl, I'm more of a video girl, meaning like if you can create something that articulates your idea and your concept with movement, imagery, and words. Les Wexner at Victoria's Secret would always say building a brand is like creating a movie. And, of the things that I learned, that was one thing that stuck with me is how do you create a movie trailer for what your concept is? And so that's actually what we did before GORGIE even had a can. We created a video of a girl with a vintage car and this drink that made her feel, unbelievably unreal. We still didn't even know what it looked like. Yet that was the way that we pitched the brand. And we took it a step forward where we even started hosting events and focus groups. We still didn't have a can. We didn't actually know if it would even be called GORGIE. We had multiple names. But in those focus groups, which by the way were happy hours where we were paying the tab, we learned that they loved the name GORGIE, they loved the idea of energy, but they wanted different benefits and different levels of caffeine. That all came to fruition within like 6 weeks.
Wow.
Just by asking.
What was behind the name GORGIE and what does it mean?
Yeah. So, you obviously see people say, oh my God, that's so gorge, and I used to love the term gorgeous humans. Like that's actually where the term started was like, what if we could create a brand that everyone just felt like a gorgeous human from the inside out? And then obviously that was too long. And so out of a deck of 70 names, and one day I'll have to like create a reel that shows them all, that was the one that was always voted on and won.
Wow.
It's short, it's cute. People see Georgie, people see GORGIE. It can relate on all spectrums.
I love that. Well, as you know, when you're launching and scaling a brand, thinking about building brand awareness and client acquisition is really important. And I feel like the ways that you acquire a client are a lot different than when you were working on, the same thing at Lively, right? So I'm curious to know from your perspective, what's changed about some of the traditional marketing levers and what have you learned over time that's now winning with GORGIE?
Yeah, when I initially started GORGIE, I thought we would be very D2C heavy out the gate. And then we quickly realized that the shelf was, our greatest billboard in telling the story and also learning what resonated. So I would say the key differences are, TikTok was our Instagram of 2016 this time around. Focus groups are still key and relevant. With all of that said though, community first is the consistent piece. And it's just a matter of how you create community. This time we're doing it in Geneva where we have, thousands of people in there that are our stickiest community members helping us say, where should we live? What should we create? What are the flavors, et cetera? These amazing humans drive sometimes 2 hours to a store launch on our behalf. They create content for us. They're our word of mouth. So There is consistency. It's just the tools in which you do it. Like, think about how brands were built before social media. It was billboards that translated into word of mouth.
Right.
So today, what's your billboard and what's your method of word of mouth?
Wow, really interesting. And so how do you feel just in general starting Gorgie has been different from starting Lively? And what are some of the lessons that you learned from your first company that you're now applying to this one?
Yeah. Lively was the era of D2C, right? It was still in a time where you could really focus on acquiring customers through Facebook, now Meta, focused on retention, digital scaling, et cetera. And then omni-channel came later to build that beautiful circle. In this chapter of brand building, from a society perspective, you really need to launch both at the same time, in my opinion. And once we launched brick and mortar for Gorgie and that started to grow, we started to unlock Amazon and that started to flourish. But neither flourished without each other. Once retail grew, once Amazon grew, we started shipping to every state in America every month. Like Alaska, Hawaii, Dakotas, and I'm such a data geek, you know that. I go in every month and I'm like, oh my God, we ship to every state like in the last 2 weeks. Because you're nurturing both sides of the human mind, which is now digital, and the shelf. The other key piece that I've learned is Lively was community first, and so was Gorgie. But how do you tell that story now? In an age that is so digitally crowded, we put our community on the can. We actually made our can the new Instagram. And so thinking about ways to appease where your customer's mindset is going, you're talking to a generation that was born on a phone. The shelf is like a new, beautiful presence. So own that.
Definitely. So much has changed about media and marketing. And one of the things that I tell people, they get really excited that they're expanding into retail. And it is great, right? But you also have to make sure that you can actually sell through on shelf.
Yes.
And with media and marketing changing so much, you have to have a strategy that is going to actually drive people into stores so that you can keep and grow that shelf space. So how do you think about pacing your retail distribution as you're still testing and learning different marketing strategies?
Yeah, number one, thing that I always wrestle with as an entrepreneur is a no today is a better yes tomorrow. And being able to not say yes to everything the first year, the first 2 years will create a better pathway for growth later, because you're going to do these bigger initiatives that much more strongly. And that partner is going to partner with you that much deeper. So you have to think the long game in some capacity with that. In terms of getting people to the shelf, there's this beautiful, magic happening between digital and physical. So there's digital apps that we use that engage our ambassadors and our consumers to let them know what shelves we're on. But then we create text moments with them and different ways to gamify going to see us, and treating your customers like ambassadors and influencers to the point that they become those. And now they're in your marketing images and your emails is huge.
Yeah, and I love what you said there too, because it's a balance of how you manage sort of your own client data with driving transaction at retail, which again, that data is not owned by you, it's owned by the retailer. So it's that interplay of how you get sort of both of those databases, so to speak, to work with each other.
And the data won't lie, which is the beautiful part of it, right? So when we see, literally when I was on my way here, our velocities are going through the roof. Our dollars per store, are double last year. And you just get the chills. You're like, it's working. Yeah. And you can't have a clear black line as to why. You just know in your gut, it's a mixture of these tactics that now are creating this velocity.
So fundraising in the consumer space hasn't been easy for a lot of entrepreneurs in the recent months. And you've successfully fundraised for Lively, roughly $15 million. And then you just raised your Series A for Gorgie, which is incredible. What advice would you give to female entrepreneurs who are looking to fundraise? And were there any challenges that you had to navigate specifically?
Yeah, I would say, fundraising, I think, is not easy for anyone. And I feel so, fortunate and grateful for my path, within that part of what I do. I would say what makes me successful on that front is my mentors. And, I really go to them asking for help first and foremost and sharing with them the idea. Even with you, when I was sharing GORGIE with you, I'm like, I have this idea. I think it's going to be amazing and so forth. And it gives me, motivation and then permission to then invite those people to join the journey. So when I raise capital, I'm not asking for money. I'm more so, do you want to join this idea, this concept of what could be the next billion-dollar brand? If so, come on board and own it with me. If not, I'm still going to call you and ask you for help. But, it's more of an invitation than an ask. I would say the second thing, as a female founder, many incredibly large, vast industries are still run by wonderful men. And we have to realize that as we're turning the tables and women are getting and gaining the seats that we deserve, we also need to acknowledge the men that are willing to help us and create those relationships. And, that's something I've created with Yossi at Gelmart, with Jason, for GORGIE, with Harvey Sanders, who's been a mentor for me for both companies. They see the potential that women have, and they want to help us create that pathway to us having the same type of seat.
Yeah, that's great. And I love what you said too, just about, not asking, but inviting. And I think to invite, it's also symbolic of planting the seeds for those relationships before you even need to fundraise. And I think that that's an important strategy across the board, whether you want to get into a retailer or, whether you're thinking about a brand partnership, you have to invest in those relationships and they take time. But in doing so, you really get to know who your potential partner is going to be. And then you also get to build trust because they've seen you in action for a period of time, right?
1000%. And you should always be fundraising when you don't need to, right? And, and that's a hard concept to grasp. But, I think I'm one of the founders that I don't lose myself with the cap table. I lose myself with, I see so much possibility. I need to surround myself with people, and cash is king. I was a finance major, with the foundation of cash so that I can make these great decisions.
Yeah.
And I'm not in a box. I'm in a beautiful open pasture.
Mm-hmm. But you do believe, though, in taking money only if you have a plan and know what you're going to do with it.
You need to know what you're going to do with it, but you also need to be bullish on the long game and kind of see, I have a 5-year plan. I've been around for a year, but I'm bullish on where I'll be in 5 years. So when I see the opportunity to raise capital, I'm applying it to that 5-year plan, not the next 5 months.
Right, right. No, that makes total sense. So it's really unique, you and I, because we both scaled our companies as a sole founder, which I would say maybe it's 50-50 roughly, but you've done this twice where you've launched businesses and you're scaling them as a sole founder. Why do you decide to do it that way? Why not bring on a co-founder and fast track it? What's important to you when you're building a business?
Yeah. I mean, I guess I never thought of the idea of co-founder. It wasn't really something that I considered when I was starting Lively. And I think it's because I was surrounded with amazing partners. My first investor in Lively was the Gelmart family, the best, producers of intimates for the lingerie category. And now they're our closest friends, right? But I was surrounded with amazing mentors and advisors in Lively that I almost felt like they were my co-founders. Yeah. And I treated it like a public company. I had fake board meetings until I had a board. GORGIE was very similar. I was so lucky that I met Jason Cohen, who partnered with me early on for GORGIE, and he came from Veggie Straws, Skinny Pop, Owen, and the beverage industry. But then I quickly went out and created a network with, amazing men and women in the industry.
So what's been really important to you when you're building your team, and what do you look for in potential hires?
Yeah, I think in the building phase, you're looking at people that view the world as puzzles, not problems. And so, you can really understand a human that loves the idea of figuring something out versus someone that wants to know how to get from A to B and how many times you want them to do that. That's later in the company. And so I look for people that want to learn how to become an entrepreneur. So, I can mentor them, hopefully, and the figuring out part enables them to go on one day and start their own company.
Well, I personally know how much time you devote to running your company. I mean, you are out there like hustling every day, and you have to, right, when you're scaling something, but you're also doing that, as a mom of two very cute kids, and it's a lot. And I'm curious to know what sort of modalities and rituals you've established for yourself that allows you to kind of maintain the energy that you need to have both in work, but also in family life.
I think one of the things I'm most proud of is my daughter Lydia is why I became an entrepreneur. When I had her, I was like, whoa, I can make human beings. Like, what else can I do? And I wanted to create a life where I had flexibility to be with my husband and my kids as I chose. That statistic or that fact, I don't know what you want to call it. Work for others 40 to 50 hours a week, work for yourself 100 hours a week, but create your environment. I learned after becoming a mother, I became more efficient with my time. And when I had my kids, Jack, I had 2 months, a year after I launched Lively, 2 months after launching, I found out I was pregnant with him, which was wild. But my rule was I wanted to be the first person they saw in the morning and the last person they saw before bed. And if I could do that, more often than not, I feel like I'm winning in some way. As they've grown, I've gained more confidence in delegating to my team and trusting that they're going to figure it out. That's the whole reason that I'm building this company this way, is for others to learn and grow with me.
Yeah, it's so important. And I talked about earlier in the very beginning just how positive and optimistic you are. And especially when you're running a business, there's so many frustrating things that I'm sure happen throughout your week. But when I see you, you just like glow and you radiate this positivity. So what is your like mindset ritual, and how do you keep that optimism? And what is sort of your philosophy about life and being a founder?
Yeah, I mean, being a founder gives me such great fulfillment. I could like literally tear up thinking about it, but it's giving me permission to live life the way that I choose. And I create impact and create jobs and hopefully C-suite roles, board roles, hopefully future female entrepreneurs. I would say the piece that I love the most is seeing my children view the way that me and my husband live our life, which is, I love to work, but I love to work because it brings me so much joy. There's very few places I go without a GORGIE can, which is wild. And there's very few places my children go without a GORGIE cooler or a bag. And they're like, Mom, why do we do this? And I'm like, because this is how you build a global brand. And I think, for me, my life hack is, and why I'm so positive is every moment I'm just so grateful for. And as a human, we're constantly frustrated. We're constantly running ourselves thin. When I get in those spaces, I stop and I pause and I'm like, oh my gosh, I get to see Nancy today. I get to film this podcast. I get to see this beautiful sky, maybe breathe in the salt air. Like the gifts that we're given are so tremendous. The rest is just, a layer to survive.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a wonderful sort of mental muscle to cultivate, is just seeing the glass half full, seeing all the beautiful things that exist. And I know part of your ritual too is you spend a lot of time outside.
Yes.
You live near a beach, you exercise. Talk to us a little bit more about why that's important to you.
Oh my gosh, yes. You know this well. Every single day I get up and I get outside in some way, whether it's a short walk, a run to the beach, I jump on a trampoline. It's 3 feet wide. It feels really amazing. But the endorphins that your body gets from movement create this unlock in your heart and your brain that allows you to see the impossible as possible. And it truly creates this euphoric moment where I come out of that sweat being like, wow, look at the day that I have. When I don't do it, it feels like I'm climbing a mountain for the first time. So why not just like release those endorphins and see the glass not just half full, but overflowing. And that's literally why I'm outside as much as I am. The ocean grounds me in reality and perspective. Often we get tunnel vision and feel stuck in, the day-to-day and all the pressure that we're living. But when you go and you see the ocean, it's constantly changing, yet not at all. And that for me is like, wow, I walked this strip of the beach when I was pregnant with my daughter, and now she's 10. I walked this strip of the beach when I was single in my 20s, and now I've been married for a decade and a half. Like, you get perspective on what, could be.
I think the connection to nature piece is really big. And I was talking to someone who just reminded me, he's like, Nancy, we live in such this like artificial, way of doing things.
Yeah.
As humans, we're meant to be in nature. But for most of us, we don't even, our feet don't touch the sand or the soil,
right?
Or we don't, spend time near trees and all of these things, especially those of us that live a very, metropolitan lifestyle.
Yeah.
And I do think that there is just a lot of inherent power to being in nature, which is why I really encourage people, even if it's just monthly, get out into nature. Instead of being on the treadmill, go for a hike.
Right.
Instead of swimming in a pool, see if you can get into an ocean.
Totally.
But all of those things I think really matter to our internal, just happiness production.
It's wild. Like even just 10 minutes a day, when I'm running down here in South Florida, I look up at the palm trees and my kids make fun of me. I'm like, they're waving at me. They're my friends. And they're like, you could see so much power in the movement of those leaves. Or even like this weekend, I just laid out in the backyard with my kids. I'm like, just lay in the grass and stare at the clouds and like think about how crazy that is, that, we live in this beautiful world and we take it for granted sometimes.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, Michelle, in our audience, we have a lot of existing and aspiring entrepreneurs, especially in the CPG space, and you've done it. You've done it really, really well. What's some advice that you would give to someone who's looking to scale their company, but maybe is discouraged by competition, the inevitable ups and downs? Yes. What would you tell that person?
Don't look at competition. Think about it as collaboration. It's number one. For Lively and Gorgie, I always say to myself and our team, you can't have, a perspective of what everyone else is doing. You have to have a perspective of why you're here and what you want to do. Gorgie has human faces on the can. It's not normal. When we were deciding how to create the can, they're like, you can't do that, Michelle. I'm like, but can't we? And when we were coming up with the color palette and the matte vibes of it, like, wait, but this isn't what energy does. I'm like, but should it? And so I think you really have to gain confidence and get bullish on how you're going to be slightly different. Now, you should, in my opinion, I do the 80-20 rule. 80% of Gorgie is just like every other beverage and CPG brand, but the 20% is what differentiates us and makes us sparkle. It's the benefits, it's the look, it's the feel, but that's 20%. It's not this like huge step away. Lively was the same thing. But I would say that, it's a world where it's such an open environment because you have these legacy industries with legacy brands, and social media and everything you see from society is asking for fresh air, for oxygen and relevancy.
I love that 80-20 and like really focusing on that 20%. How are you going to make yourself different? What is going to be your unique edge? Yes. I think that's a great tip.
It's the windows of the store, everyone. The t-shirts are the same in the back, but the front windows are different.
Completely. Well, this was so fun. And before we wrap up, we're actually going to pivot into one of my favorite parts, which is 5 fire facts. So it's a rapid fire interview so that our audience can get to know you more casually.
Amazing.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Favorite Gorgie flavor?
Ooh, Paradise Punch right now. The turquoise, people, the turquoise.
Oh, it's so good. That's actually my favorite. Favorite activity to do with your kids?
Oh, beach, beach, beach. Collecting shells, whale watching, whatever it is.
Love it. The one gadget you can't live without?
Oh, the one gadget I can't live without. Okay. Also a hot water heater. I love hot water and tea, and I have these like little hot water heaters that I use everywhere.
Favorite local spot to get inspired or think creatively?
I run to this inlet near my house, which obviously is by the jetty of the beach, but I love to go there and just stare at the sun and the water and everything around me.
Nice. All right, last one. Essential travel item for business trips.
This is also very odd. I love a box of Altoids when I travel. I don't know why. They're like so nostalgic and like powerful at the same time. It has zero relevance to business. I would say the other piece from a business perspective is a list of good podcasts, because I'm not a reader and I binge podcasts when I'm in airports and on the plane and so forth. And it gets me invigorated and inspired for whatever I'm tending.
Well, I'm really excited for this audience to listen to this episode because I learned so much from you today, Michelle. Thank you so much. And where can people find buy and discover Gorgie?
Yes, so please check us out at getgorgie.com, on Amazon, and on social media at getgorgie.
Thank you so much, Michelle. This was so fun.
Oh, adore you. Thank you.
To stay connected with Michelle, the Maker's Mindset community, and me, check out all the details in the episode description below. And check out Spotify or Apple Podcasts to hear a few bonus reflections from me on this episode. And don't forget to subscribe to this series, leave a review, and share it with your community. Thanks so much for tuning in.